I love that song.
Yeah, I know. It just makes you want to just get up and start, doing your.
It never gets
Um,
old for me.
no, it doesn't. It's all anything with a good beat. So, thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm glad you could be here with us. Jan is with me today. Hey,
Hey,
Jan.
Steve. Hey, everybody.
So, from what I understand, we're gonna go back in time and we're gonna discuss cost or prices of things from one of my favorite decades, the 1950s.
Very excellent, Steve. Steve, thank you so much for having me here. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here, everyone. You know, uh, you think of today, you think of yesteryear, and I know something. Sometimes it's just really nice to take a break from today and think about a little bit about yesteryear. And it was just such a different world. Here's some fun money facts from the 1950s. 50. I was born in very, very late 58, almost 59, but I'm a product of the 1950s. Yay. But let's talk about economics, economical facts. Thanks to President Eisenhower and his combination of low taxes, balanced budgets, and public spending, the economy prospered. In fact, the overall economy grew by, are you sitting or standing, everybody? 37% during the 1950s. Unemployment stayed low at about 4.5%. Hello, hello, hello. And at the end of the 1950s, the average American family had about, get a load of this, everybody, 30% more spending power than at the beginning of the 1950s. Doesn't sound like the moment of now. I'm just saying. Also, every year in the 1950s, the average American family spent about, maybe some of you can guess it before I even say it, X number of dollars a year on food as compared to a whopping $8,000 a year that we are spending today. Did anybody take a guess about this? The number is $800 a year back in the 1950s. This is not a trivial game or anything, but I just thought I'd throw that in to stump you in case you didn't know. Next, back in the 1950s, can you even imagine the cost of a large pizza? How much do people pay today for a large pizza from the pizzeria? The price could be from the sublime to the absolutely ridiculous. However, back in the 1950s, a large pizza, not slice, a large entire pizza cost around $1.50. 1.50. Amazing. Next to know, in 1950, guess what? The average cost to own a home was not $10,000, not $12,000, but $7,000, 7,354. I tried to ask this question earlier to Steve and I couldn't believe it. He practically got it down to the penny correctly. That is amazing, Steve. And if you ever heard your parents ever mention how much was the price of an ice cream cone in the 1950s, and you might have thought they were exaggerating, in the early 50s, the price of an ice cream cone was a mere 5 cents, a nickel, a nickel. Unbelievable. When I was a kid in the 60s, and I'll talk more about that in a future show, back in the 1960s, I do recall paying about 15 to 20 cents for a popsicle. And that is so amazing, just absolutely amazing. Just to mention that the cost of a TV back in the 1950s, if you want to venture to guess, what would be the cost of a TV back in the 1950s? Take a second to do that. I was surprised to learn the number, and actually was much more affordable than I thought. Back in the 1950s, the cost of a TV was between $100 to $200, but depending on how fancy the TV set was, because some were plain and some came with a ton of bells and whistles. Some of them looked literally like a really beautiful big piece of furniture, from my recollection. And just to make sure that in 1950, what do you think the average yearly income might have been in 1950? In 1950, the average yearly income, now the actual year, 1950, starting off that decade, the actual yearly income back then was $3,100. However, in 1959, at the end of the decade, towards the end of the decade, the cost of average yearly income back then was $5,100 a year. You know, that's a pretty big jump from 1950 in prosperity to 1959, being from, let's say, about $3,100 in 1950 to $5,100 at the end, almost the end of the decade. Let me tell you something, in my honest opinion, Steve, and anyone viewing this, I believe we could take some good lessons, learn from the wisdom of everyone back in the 1950s. It was absolutely a time of common sense practices, and as a result, a time of prosperity. What says you about this, Steve?
Well, yes, I did get pretty close on the cost of a home because there was something on one of my social media platforms that we both share. And I saw this memorabilia, must have been a newspaper ad somebody had took a scanned shot of or something, screenshot. And it said what a house cost back in 1955. And it said it was about $7,000 for the average house. So that's why I kind of came pretty close on that. But I also have a few prices of things from the 50s as well. Um, a gallon of milk. This actually took me by surprise. A gallon of milk in the 50s was only 83 cents a gallon.
Oh, my word. 83 cents. Imagine.
Yeah, the cheapest I might be able to find milk today, either at a wholesale club, if I'm lucky, or at Walmart or someplace like that. I might be able to get a gallon for about 3 if I'm lucky.
That's on a lucky day, right?
Right. So, no, that sounds, I don't know, 83 cents back in the 50s. That sounds kind of high if you think
Kind
about
of high. I was saying that to myself as well, but that's what it presented on the facts that of research. Yeah,
But keep in mind, back in the 50s, you used to also have milk delivered to your house
that's right.
in the glass bottles, you
That's
know.
right.
Um, this one, I don't know, even this sounds a little high, but I'll mention it. The price of a gallon of gas was 27 cents, but I don't know, that sounds a little steep because my dad, he was a child, preteen, teenager in the 50s, and I remember him saying he would pay like 21, 22. Sometimes he even found gas for like 19 cents a gallon. So I don't know. I guess well back then I know regular gas was popular. That's how cars ran. You don't have it anymore. You have to buy that lead substitute now to put in it if you own that era of car. Because back then dad said all you had was regular and high test gas. So if you bought high test, yeah, I guess I could see where the 27 would come in, you know.
Can you imagine those people back in the day if we were ever to sit down with them and say, guess what? In X number of years, people are going to be paying $5, $6 a gallon.
Yeah, right now, a gallon of gas, again, I try to stay within the wholesale club world of gas.
Yes.
The last gallon that was paid was like 316, which I thought was good for now because right around here out in town, it's 339, 342, 3, you know, I think the lowest I saw was 330. But still, going to the wholesale club, I am saving a little bit per gallon.
Right.
And then, and things like that. Now, this one was pretty good. I like, and I also came very close on this too. the price of a brand new car in 1950 was $2,210. But if you wanted something like an Oldsmobile or a Buick or a Cadillac or a Lincoln or Mercury, anything, more upscale, yeah, the price went up. I'm guessing this would be like the price of like a Ford or a Chevy,
Right.
something simple. Um,
And cars are manufactured here.
right, not
So, yeah.
not in hip skitch North Africa, no pun intended, as they
Yeah.
say. But I gave you a total on the price. I said 2,100. So
I almost fell down when I threw that question at you for the heck of it
yeah,
earlier in the green room. And I'm like, I know Steve loves the 50s, just in
I
case you're
do.
watching. He really does.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how on earth did this 1974 born person know this? But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, here's another good one. This took me a little bit by surprise. But in a way, no. The price of a hamburger in the 50s was 12 cents.
oh, I want a dozen.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not fair.
Because I know in my time as a kid, because when in the early 80s, when I came to the States from overseas, um, McDonald's, which is a completely different slate than what you have now, a McDonald's hamburger in 1983 was about 27, 28 cents, but that was for the regular, just a plain Jane. If you wanted it with cheese, it was like 31, 32 cents, a little bit.
Imagine it wasn't like all that long ago. I mean, well, I'm older, so the 80s doesn't seem like, but it wasn't like, like prehistoric times.
No. And even back then, even in the early 80s, we were still going through an inflation back then. You know, remember, not that I'm trying to get political here, but Reagan had to go back and clean up what Carter did.
No.
But we'll just leave it right there.
Yeah.
But but yeah, and then so I am really amazed to see what these prices from the 1950s are. Also considering back then a minimum wage
Yeah.
was right around $1 an hour. That's all you made.
It's just incredible. $1 an hour minimum wage. But you know something, Steve? And this isn't political what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
This goes back to common sense. Okay. I'm a common sense person. So I'm going to apply my life in a more common sense manner. President Eisenhower, what he implemented, as I read off in the beginning of this topic, I mean, come on, thanks to his wisdom, combination of low taxes, balanced budget, and public spending. The economy was just much better overall. We prospered back in the 1950s and it grew by 37%. That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Unemployment, Steve, was only at 4.5%. It goes to show that common sense, no matter what the decade, no matter what political influence, in our own lives, I can't control really what goes on around me, but I can control what goes on in my hemisphere at home. Steve, this is why I like to give, tips and tricks all the time. What you contribute in your way, even though you have a random show like common sense practices. I think if everyone steps back to a little more common sense practices, everything would be a lot better economically, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but just my opinion.
No, I don't. No, I'm in agreement with you. No, you're right on that. No, absolutely. But I've been thinking about something. This was a fun little segment because basically this particular subject, we kind of are thinking a little bit outside the box because we've never done anything like this before. So in the future, not way distant future, but maybe later in the month, I wouldn't mind going through the times. The next one we should do is cost of the 1960s.
Oh, I'm in on that because I was a child in the 1960s.
Right.
So it would be bringing back a lot of fun memories. That sounds great.
Right. And then another day we could, the 70s, the 80s.
Why not?
Um, you know, and just a thought out loud, because I want to try to mix it up. Since I am random, I want to try mixing it up and not always, focus on things in a straight line. I like to veer off a little bit, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, Jan, this was a good little segment. I
Thanks
really,
for having me here.
you're welcome. Hey, it was fun going back to the 1950s. And I'm actually very surprised I actually knew, or how close I came. Keep in mind, I was just taking a very lucky, educated guess. I really didn't know. I
Oh,
mean,
you did great.
yeah, because we're talking about a decade that's two decades prior to me coming into this world. So, it is the decade of which you were born, but yeah.
You
But
know
I
something, Steve? That's why I like to watch. Excuse me for interrupting.
yeah, yeah.
I like to watch some of the old classics, the ones that are still in black and white. I love to watch. I love the feel. Love the ambiance. I love the little things. People going into a thing called a telephone booth. For those that don't know, there was
Right.
people were born in an era where they didn't know this thing existed. Like little pieces of American history, little phone booths, little newspaper stands. What's a newspaper, right? Drug stores, like a pharmacy, but except you had a counter. And if you wanted a cup of coffee and a piece of pie while you waited for your prescription, I've
Uh-huh.
done that. I've done that. I had a pharmacy like that right here on my corner. They called it the drugstore back then in the 1960s. It was amazing.
Yeah.
People would get their coffee and pick up their pharmaceuticals. It was amazing.
Yep. Yep. Everything. It. Well, it's a whole different world. I mean, going back that far, even if you go back, this is a funny thing. Even if you go back 30 years, 25 years, 30 years,
Yes.
even then it was a different world.
Yes. And Steve, can I mention something before you close the show? If you ever watch those old classic TV shows and you see men and women more dressed up, that was not an exaggeration. People really cared about things like that. Men wore the nice hats and the nice
Mhm.
overcoats. It was true. Suits, jackets, women got dressed up in a more, fancier manner, more modest manner. And to me, looking back on that fondly, to me, it's just so fun looking back at that. It was amazing.
Since you mentioned the 1950s, I'll tell you a 50s TV show I just got through watching this past weekend. In fact, it comes on. What did I find that on? Was it on Tubi? Because you can do a lot of streaming. You really don't need cable. You got so many different apps out there you can use. I was watching a show called Our Miss Brooks.
I heard that name. I never watched it, but I heard the name.
It's pretty good. It's got Eve Arden in it, an actress named Eve Arden.
Yes, I
Um,
like to work.
yeah,
Yes.
an actor named Richard Crenna. Now I'm really going.
Oh, yes, yes. He was on the Real McCoys.
That's the one, and it was a no, but anything 50s. I Love Lucy. Um,
So fun. So
Make
fun.
Room for Daddy. Your
Yes.
favorite, your favorite. Father Knows Best.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Because you can Leave It to Beaver. That's also, but that was in the latter part of the 50s,
Latter
but
part,
still,
it's amazing. To me, it's like watching a piece of American history, and it was just so wonderful. And I kind of miss it. I kind of do. But I'm glad we got
yeah.
those shows to remind us.
But
Oh, Steve, this was so fun. Thank you.
I'm about to give off of me being an official 1950s aficionado.
Yes.
But, but in the 1950s, Betty White had a TV series called Life with Elizabeth. Now think about that.
Gee Willikins.
Yeah, she had a TV show called, and it was pretty popular. It lasted a few years, but um, yeah, I had to throw that out there. No, I really do like the
Was that
1950s.
like a sitcom? Like, was
Yeah,
it funny? Yeah.
yeah, it
Oh,
was a
okay.
sitcom. It was, but
Amazing.
yeah, but and again, all of these shows, it might be available on a streaming app. If not, you got it right here on the same
Yeah, type
platform that
in
we.
the name if you're not sure. You might find a segment of it, even if it's a few seconds of these shows, just for historical purposes and for fun.
Yeah, but I believe Life with Elizabeth was like on the early 50s side, like 52,
Wow, amazing.
4 maybe. I don't that one, but I know it's in the maybe even as high as 55. But yeah, but she had a sitcom back in the 50s. I mean, you
She
know,
was very funny.
yeah, she was. And then, of course, years later,
Oh yeah.
okay. Well, everybody, I'm glad that everybody could join us today on this segment. And again, be on the lookout. We'll get together and we'll do the 1960s. That'll be a fun one to do. I look forward to that. So I hope everybody has a great rest of whatever time of day it is. And I or we will see you back here next time. Bye for now.
Bye bye.